Good afternoon. The Subcommittee on Technology and Innovation will now come to order, and pursuant to notice, the Subcommittee on Technology and Innovation meets to consider the following measure, H.R. 5789, the Science and Technology Innovation Act of 2008. We will now proceed with the markup, beginning with opening statements, and the Chair recognizes himself. I want to welcome everyone to the Subcommittee markup of H.R. 5789, the Science and Technology Innovation Act of 2008. This bill reauthorizes two programs critical to the competitiveness of the United States, the Small Business Innovation Research Program, or SBIR, and the Small Business Technology Transfer Research Program, STTR. Our committee has been working on this bill for quite some time, and I want to thank Ranking Member Phil Gingrey and all the members of the committee for continuing our work in crafting legislation which supports innovation. In today's economy, small business is often where innovation comes from. The Science and Technology Committee, and especially the Technology and Innovation Subcommittee, intends to promote science and technology research that drives an innovation-based economy. SBIR and STTR are key components of our innovation agenda. At more than $2.3 billion per year, SBIR and STTR comprise the largest source of federal support for technological innovation for the private sector. These funds help companies with innovative ideas bring their products to market to create both new products and jobs. However, these programs originated more than 20 years ago, and much has changed since then. These programs need to be restructured to reflect the current global competitive environment, and the Technology and Innovation Subcommittee held numerous hearings last year on the SBIR and STTR programs to analyze their place in an innovation agenda for the 21st century. Our witnesses made many suggestions on how the SBIR and STTR programs could be strengthened. During hearings for the reauthorization of the National Nanotechnology Initiative, witnesses said that programs like SBIR and STTR are necessary if the U.S. is going to capture the economic benefits of our federal investment in nanotechnology research. Outside groups agree. SBIR and STTR are important to commercializing inventions that begin with investments in basic research and end with new jobs, new products, and new services. Members of this committee agree on the importance of our high-tech entrepreneurial companies in creating new technologies, and these are exactly the companies targeted by SBIR. STTR links these small high-tech companies with our universities, which are a key cradle of new high-tech ideas. Based upon this subcommittee's hearings, H.R. 5798 will do the following. It reauthorizes the SBIR and STTR programs through 2010. Although this period is short, it will put both programs on the same reauthorization cycle. In addition, the authorization time frame will give Congress time to examine how well each program is working to better focus on innovation. Next, for any federal agency which spends more than $100 million per year in intramural or extramural research, the set-aside increases to 3.0% for SBIR and to 0.6% for STTR. This emphasizes the importance we place upon SBIR and STTR as part of the innovation agenda. Third, this bill increases Phase 1 awards from $100,000 to $300,000, and it increases Phase 2 awards from $750,000 to $2.2 million to better reflect the actual costs of doing high-tech research in today's environment. Number 4, it increases the flexibility of the SBIR program by allowing cross-agency awards and allowing applicants to apply directly for Phase 2 funding. Number 5, the bill allows venture capital-backed small businesses to apply for awards and defines eligibility requirements. Number 6, the bill expands requirements on agency databases of award recipients and also requires interoperability and accessibility between agency databases, and this will permit improved oversight by the agencies and by Congress on how the agencies and how the programs are operating. Number 7, the bill allows for no more than 3% of program funds to be used for administrative costs. Currently, agencies pay for administration of SBIR by taking funds from other agency programs, and naturally, they must try to administer the program as cheaply as possible. This results in little oversight of the program with a focus on simply obligating all of the funds. That is not the type of management we want for a over $2 billion program. At our hearing, it was agreed that allowing some administrative costs would help improve the quality and oversight of the program. And finally, the bill establishes an interagency committee co-chaired by the Director of OSTP and the Director of NIST to report to Congress on both practices for commercialization of SBIR and STTR funded research. In closing, this subcommittee has been a leader in passing legislation that advances our innovation agenda. Today, we continue our leadership by reauthorizing SBIR and STTR. I urge my colleagues to support the legislation, and I now recognize Dr. Gingrey to present his opening remarks.
Chairman Wu, I'm pleased that this markup has been called today to look at the important issue of reauthorizing both the Small Business Innovation Research Grant Program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, SBTT. These are both grant programs that have been effective in providing government assistance to small businesses to help more people in our country achieve the American dream. However, Mr. Chairman, I do have to express concerns with the process, the legislative process by which this bill has been conducted. I appreciate the majority's willingness to hold hearings on this important matter like we did last summer. But I do find it troubling that the final text of the Science and Technology Innovation Act of 2008 was only made available to the minority once this markup was scheduled late last week. I'm proud to say, as I have many times in the past, that this committee operates in a very bipartisan way. In most cases, our minority side is certainly given the opportunity to provide its input to the bills before they are marked up at the subcommittee level. However, I find it unfortunate that that bipartisanship was compromised, I think, on this bill, maybe for the sake of legislative expediency. Had the minority been consulted much earlier and had we been given a better notice of today's markup, I truly believe that this legislation would be a reflection of broad input from members on both sides of the aisle. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman, and I understand the gentleman's concern about the pace of these proceedings, and I personally apologize for any sense of rush on this bill, and quite honestly, it was our intent, I think, by staff on both sides to mark up this bill just a little ways down the pike. But I do believe that a copy of the bill, which is substantially unchanged from today's bill, was given to both the majority and the minority side around the middle of March. But it was the expectation of both sides that this markup would occur a little bit later than this, and due to circumstances beyond this chairman's control, the markup is occurring today.
Chairman, if you'll yield to me
yes, I'd be happy to
for
yield.
A question. Well, that being said, is it the intention that this bill will be marked up in the full committee after we get done with the markup today in subcommittee?
This subcommittee will mark up the legislation. The full Small Business Committee, which traditionally has marked up first. Will mark up parallel legislation tomorrow, and then we will be bringing those bills together and bringing the legislation to the floor.
If the chairman will yield for just an additional
I'd be happy
question,
to yield.
is it not true, though, that that is not what we would normally consider regular order? Regular order being a markup at the subcommittee level, and then pending approval there, a markup by the full committee. I would assume that's what's happening in the Small Business Committee, and I just wonder why the swaying away from regular order in that regard.
Reclaiming my time. My understanding, although I'm not intimately familiar with their proceedings, my understanding is that the Small Business Committee is not having a subcommittee markup. They are having a full committee markup. Now, prior to this date, at least in this Congress, we have, as far as I know, consistently moved legislation from subcommittee to full committee and then to the floor. There may have been an exclusion to that during the 100 days agenda, but I'm working off recollection, and I just don't know if it's 100% or not.
If the chairman will yield.
I'd be happy to yield.
Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate very much that explanation. How do you foresee these bills being put together before they go to the floor?
I think that that the two committees, the bill as marked up by this subcommittee, and the bill as marked up by the full Small Business Committee will be substantially similar. That's not to preclude the possibility that there may be managers' amendments or other changes between there and the Rules Committee and the floor.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, and nothing I say should be construed as criticism of you or the chairman of the full committee or of the majority party. But I'm disturbed by the process, and largely because this, once again, is a case where the Science Committee is getting stomped upon by another committee with which it shares jurisdiction. We are equal partners in this particular topic of SBIR. SBA runs the program, but we are supposed to monitor the science related to it. And by the extreme rush with which the other committee is handling this without giving us adequate time to deal with it, with suddenly going to a full committee, reporting it out to the floor, does not give us an opportunity to really work our will on this. We have had the hearings. We've had a couple of hearings over 2 years on this issue, waiting for the other committee of jurisdiction to act, and now finally they're acting, and after 2 years of diddling around, suddenly it has to be done in 2 days and go to the floor immediately. I object to that procedure partially because I think it really endangers the jurisdiction of this committee. This is not the first time that other committees have treated us shabbily. I think we really have to, as the youngest committee here, and one that did not get adequate jurisdiction when it was originally created. Obviously, NIH should be in this committee, but it isn't because another committee refused to give it up. But we see this over and over, and the only way we're going to get the subjects before this committee that really belong before this committee is to dig in our heels and say, enough. We're going to claim full responsibility and full opportunity in this committee as well. So as I say, this is not a criticism of you or the majority in any sense. It's a criticism of the institution, perhaps, on behalf of this committee, that we really have to make it clear we're here to stay. We're going to act with force on all issues that come before us. And above all, I would hope that the majority would insist that when this bill goes to the floor, it go after proceeding through the Rules Committee, so we have the opportunity to present amendments there. If after this charade that we're going through now, it goes directly to the floor, on a suspension, we will not have had any opportunity to influence. I will certainly raise strong objections to that, and I try to get the leaders of the minority party to also raise a fuss about it. Just there be an opportunity to debate these issues on the floor, at least, if we don't have a chance to work on them, the other committee of jurisdiction. So, as you know, I'm an even-tempered person. I don't get angry often. But this is a case where I think we have to fight together. We have to fight for the jurisdiction of this committee and make it known that we do not want this sort of. Thank you very much for yielding.
I thank the gentleman for his comments and reclaiming my time. Without commenting on the scheduling of any other committee, it is precisely because I believe very strongly in the input of the subcommittee and preferably the whole committee that we are holding this markup today so that members can have as much opportunity as possible to consider the bill, to propose amendments, and the gentleman certainly has my full support to take this bill to the floor under a rule rather than under suspension of the rules.
And I do thank you for holding this hearing, and I appreciate that.
I thank the gentleman.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd yield for an additional short
I'd be
point.
happy to yield.
The gentleman from Michigan said he's even-tempered. The gentleman from Georgia is also even-tempered, mad all the time. But no, truly, in the spirit of bipartisanship, which especially prevails on this subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, we respect you for that. A great make-up call not only would be to bring this bill to the floor under a rule, but also encourage you, Mr. Subcommittee Chairman, to ask our full committee chairman and maybe also Chairman Valaquez of the Small Business Committee to encourage the Rules Committee to make this an open rule, and that would be, I think, a very great statement for bipartisanship, and we hope that you would do that for us.
Reclaiming my time, I certainly enjoy and encourage and value the bipartisanship of this subcommittee and the full committee. I will strongly encourage bringing this bill under a rule to the floor. I'm afraid that if it is what kind of rule it's under is a little bit above my pay grade. And I thank the gentleman for his comments. We do have a set of floor votes which have been called, and there are 2 minutes left to vote. And under those circumstances, I would like to recess this hearing, this markup, until after the floor votes, and those floor votes will take probably somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes, and we will reconvene very promptly after the floor votes. The committee is reconvened. Without objection, any members who have opening statements may place their statements in the record at this point. I ask unanimous consent that the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point, and that members proceed with the amendments in the order of the roster. Without objection, so ordered. The first amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Dr. Ehlers. Dr. Ehlers, are you ready to proceed with your amendment? The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5780.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. So ordered. Dr. Ehlers, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very straightforward amendment. It would strike sections 201 and 202, which provide for an increase in the agency set aside to 3%, when it's currently 2.5% for SBIR, and 0.6% up from the current 0.3% for the STTR. My concern about this is, first of all, it's a substantial increase in the set-aside in both cases. Secondly, as we all know, when the omnibus bill was passed last fall, it did major damage to the funding for the science organizations of the federal government, particularly the National Science Foundation, NIST, Department of Energy, and several other agencies. And it seems to me particularly strange that when we have either reduced or given very small increases for the basic research, which this country desperately needs, and which is what the Competes Act was all about, which this committee worked on so hard for so long. It seems strange to me when the funding is low that we would increase the set-aside and do even greater damage to agencies such as the National Science Foundation, et cetera. It's just, even aside from whether or not they should have the increase, which we can certainly debate, this is obviously the wrong time to do it, and I believe it will hurt the science agencies of the federal government, which are already really struggling. Department of Energy, for example, is laying off several hundred people as a result of the cuts they received in the omnibus bill. So I strongly support this amendment, and I hope we would pass it. We can consider changing the set-aside at some future date once we properly restore funding to the science agencies I mentioned. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Anyone seeking time? Then the chair recognizes himself. Regrettably, I oppose this amendment. The increase to 3% would be more than offset by the R&D increases authorized in the America Competes Act. If the authorization levels are met by the appropriators, the increase to 3% will not decrease the amount of funds available for pure research. Additionally, at our hearings, there is uniform support for increasing the size of awards at a minimum to adjust for inflation. However, I think that many folks are concerned that if we do increase the size of awards, that there would be fewer awards. So we do need to increase the set-aside, and on that basis, I support the gentleman's sentiment to increase the amount of money available for research, but I think that 3% is a reasonable number for commercialization of the products of the fruits of that research, to turn the research into products and jobs. Any other comment on the amendment?
Will the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
Thank you for yielding. I just would like to comment that, and I can see the handwriting on the wall here, but I think this is another good argument for taking this to the floor under a rule so that we will have an opportunity to offer these amendments there, primarily because this is not going to full committee. And so most of the Science Committee will not have an opportunity to debate this amendment unless we do have the opportunity to present the amendment on the floor.
Reclaiming my time, as the gentleman knows, I support the gentleman's sentiment about bringing this this legislation to the floor under a rule. Is there any further discussion of the amendment?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman.
The chairman of the full committee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, he doesn't need that long, but let me just say that Dr. Ehlers has a reputation for not bringing frivolous gotcha amendments to this committee, and this is a thoughtful, there can be disagreements, but no one would disagree that his approach here, it is my understanding, and I am not guaranteeing anything, but it's my understanding that there's an interest in bringing this this bill to the floor with a rule. I will communicate, again, for whatever that's worth, to the Rules Committee that I think it is appropriate I may not support it, and I probably won't support it because there has been a delicate balance reached in making this with a lot of consultation, both with the minority as well as with the small business. But there can be no question that this is a worthwhile amendment, and I will again ask. I used to be on the Rules Committee, but I'm not any longer, so all I can do is ask.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion of the amendment? And if not, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. No. The noes, in the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. And the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, could we have a recorded vote on that, please?
The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Wu.
No.
Chairman Wu votes no. Ms. Richardson. No. Ms. Richardson votes no. Mr. Matheson. Mr. Matheson votes no. Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Wilson. No. Mr. Wilson votes no. Mr. Chandler. Mr. Chandler votes no. Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Gordon. No. Mr. Gordon votes no. Mr. Gingrey. Yes. Mr. Gingrey votes aye. Mr. Ehlers. Yes. Mr. Ehlers votes aye. Mrs. Biggert. Aye. Mrs. Biggert votes aye. Mr. Adrian Smith. Aye. Mr. Adrian Smith votes aye. Mr. Brown. Mr. Hall.
The clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, 4 members vote aye and 7 members vote no.
The amendment is not agreed to. The second amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Dr. Gingrey. Dr. Gingrey, are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 017, amendment to H.R. 5789, offered by Mr. Gingrey of Georgia.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with a reading. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize the ranking member, Dr. Gingrey, for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This amendment that I'm offering to H.R. 5789 will provide a practical way to maintain the integrity of SBIR and STTR programs. In the current form, the bill allows for companies to apply directly for a Phase 2 grant, and we know those grants have a maximum award now of $2.2 million. They can do this without having received a Phase 1 grant. I find this practice to be somewhat problematic because it allows companies to conduct Phase 1 process on private funds before approaching the federal government for SBIR or STTR assistance in Phase 2. Ostensibly, if a company has the ability to use private funds for Phase 1, then it should be able to continue to Phase 2 on private funds. I believe that the current language regarding this within H.R. 5789 only provides incentives to companies that can already afford to cultivate R&D initiatives to come to the federal government when they should not do so. This practice has the potential of reducing the opportunity for companies that truly need the assistance to utilize SBIR and STTR programs the way they are intended. I'm offering this amendment to specifically address this issue by striking the language that provides for bypassing Phase 1 grants. Therefore, the bill would require that in order for a company to be eligible for a Phase 2 grant, it would first have to have been a recipient of a Phase 1 grant. I believe that adopting this amendment will strengthen the SBIR and STTR programs so that they can fulfill the mission that of providing small business assistance to entrepreneurs that are in the most need of financial assistance from the federal government. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. And, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman, and again, regrettably, I must oppose the amendment because if a small business has already done the preliminary work under Phase 1, I do not think that the business should be penalized for having spent its own money and then coming to the federal government for a Phase 2 grant and skipping Phase 1. The amounts are dramatically different. A Phase 1 grant under the proposed legislation is for $300,000, and a company that can afford $300,000 in development may not be able to afford the new amount in Phase 2 of $2.2 million. The agencies which testified to this subcommittee stated that it would enhance SBIR and STTR programs if a small business could apply directly for a Phase 2 award. And I must add that this is not a mandatory program. This is an option to the agencies to permit skipping Phase 1 if they choose to do so. Does anyone else seek recognition on the amendment? If not, then the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. It is now in order to consider the third amendment on the roster, and it is also offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Dr. Gingrey. Dr. Gingrey, are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 019, amendment to H.R. 5789, offered by Mr. Gingrey of Georgia.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading, and without objection, so ordered. I recognize the gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Again, I brought forth what I believe is a very common sense and practical amendment to ensure that small business innovation research grants actually go to small business applicants. Put simply, venture capital is important to small business initiatives because it provides needed financial assistance and credibility to the ideas and products that possess the potential to be commercialized. However, because these grants are intended for small business research and development, we must ensure that venture capital does not represent a majority of the financial interest within a SBIR application. The manner in which this bill is currently written only limits a single venture capital firm from owning 49% of the interest of the company applying for the SBIR grant. This leaves open the possibility that more than one venture capital firms could own in the aggregate a majority of financial interest within the company. I mean, it is an example in the aggregate, all owning less than 49%, they could own 99% of the company if you had two or more, as an example. Additionally, I've just given that worst case scenario. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe that this really goes against the spirit of the SBIR program, and I had some language that I wanted to read from the report language of the original bill back in 1982, and it says, the recognition of the ability of the small firm to develop and commercialize new technologies, coupled with the apparently declining rate of innovation and productivity in the United States industry as a whole, have led to widespread interest in the problems of small business community and the amount of federal R&D funding which is flowing into this sector. And then it goes on to say, under subparagraph B, state of small business participation in federal R&D. A purpose of the bill is to increase the utilization of small businesses in federal research and development. Some have argued that a set-aside of federal R&D funds for small business is justified on the basis that small firms have been demonstrably innovative and yet receive a small share of the federal R&D budget. During debate on the legislation, frequent references have been made to the small business share of federal R&D. Mr. Chairman, again, I believe that hopefully reflects the original intent of the bill, and that what we're doing in regard to venture capitalists goes against the spirit of the SBIR program. Reading further from that report language, it says specifically, the legislation is also intended to provide seed capital to small, high-technology firms at the early, high-risk stage of initial concept development. Funds provided under HR, well, that was the name of the bill back then. They go on to elaborate on that point. So the program is designed to provide assistance to a small business that may have an idea that can be considered a diamond in the rough, if you will, without necessarily having the financial backing to move its promising idea toward commercialization and maybe even the interest of venture capitalists at the outset. My amendment would ensure that we continue to help out the true small business entrepreneur by simply limiting the total amount of venture capital investment in the company of an SBIR applicant to 49% of their financial interest. With the adoption of this amendment, this legislation will acknowledge the importance of the influence that venture capital can play in small business research and development while still maintaining the integrity of the SBIR program. Mr. Chairman, I urge all my colleagues on the subcommittee support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman.
If the chairman would yield, let me just say, although Dr. Gingrey is not quite as pure as Dr. Ehlers, I recognize this is not a frivolous amendment by any means, and that it is offered in good spirit. I have some concerns about basing an amendment on a 1982 report, but I know that, again, this is legitimate. I want to also point out that I'm uncomfortable with this procedure. I think, we've never taken this, although in previous Congresses it had been not uncommon to be what you might say out of regular order. We have not done that in this Congress. I think this is somewhat different in the fact that the minority received the draft on March the 19th. There were only minor changes, of which one was one of the minority suggestions that was incorporated into it. We got into extensive deliberations with the small business, and much of which was, as Dr. Ehlers always recommends, maintaining our jurisdiction and trying to get it right. And so, for that reason, we're going to be going, to the floor next week. There is not time to have a full committee markup, but I am once again going to recommend to the to the Rules Committee that both of Dr. Gingrey's amendments be made in order, because I think it's appropriate that we have a fuller, a more full discussion on this. So, again, with that said, I will yield back the balance of my time.
If there are no other speakers, I must again regrettably oppose the amendment. I must say that from the inception of SBIR until an administrative law judge decision, there was no restriction on participation of venture capital in SBIR applicants. And in my view, the administrative law judge got the law wrong in 2003 in interpreting the term American person. And I view that as a domestic ownership requirement, but the ALJ decided that the term person did not include non-real person entities, and that's a distinction that lawyers make as a standard item of statutory interpretation. So after that, in my view, erroneous interpretation, venture capitalists have not been permitted to own a majority stake in SBIR applicants, and this bill, in essence, partially reverses that decision, and it is a carefully crafted partial reversal of that decision. No single venture capitalist may own a majority share of an SBIR applicant, but a consortium of venture capitalists may own any particular percentage of an applicant, and it is precisely those applicants which are potentially in a weaker negotiating position, which may have had to give up a larger share of their equity in order to get the application, that would be hurt by a restriction on SBIR applications by those entities, which have had to give up more than 50% of their ownership in order to get financed by a venture capitalist. And just one further point is that after this ALJ decision restricting the type of applicants eligible for SBIR grants, the National Cancer Institute noted a drop-off in applications and potentially a decrease in the quality of the applicants. Frequently, the venture capitalists are backing folks who have a better mousetrap, and a lot of those folks have become ineligible to apply for venture capital. So for all those reasons, I am going to oppose the motion.
Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really a difficult issue and something that we have discussed in this committee quite a few times. And I guess my concern is the same as before, that another committee has made this decision and we're simply accepting it. We've had some very good discussions and good ideas that have emerged, and this is, I think, sort of a brute force approach. I think to really resolve the problem properly and fairly for all parties, we need more consideration, more discussion, and try to come up with an approach that really accomplishes or accommodates all the parties involved. And so I'm hesitant to, I certainly support the amendment just because that will help us approach it better in further discussion. But I think I recognize there's a possibility we need some change here, but why this sudden dramatic change? And I would prefer that we did it in a more deliberate manner and tried to come up with a solution that really made more sense. So I will support the amendment and hope that we can debate this on the floor.
If the gentleman would yield.
Be happy to yield.
In terms of any discussion with other committees, I'd just like to point out that it was this committee which stood up for the ability of applicants to structure their capital structure any which way that they wished, and not any other committee. And I yield back to the gentleman.
Yeah, I will yield back. Thank you.
If the chairman would yield, I know just very quickly. Once
Five
again, the reason that there should be no misunderstanding that the reason that we're running a little bit late is that the committee staff negotiated hard and tough and wouldn't let it come up because they're next week until we got concessions from the other committee in question. Let me also point out that we've got to go through, hopefully this will pass on the floor, and hopefully the Senate will get up a bill, and that we'll go through conference, and that this is a dialogue that will continue, and because we want the best, bill that we can get.
Is there any further discussion of the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, if you'll yield.
I have no time to yield, but if...
I will yield.
Mr. Chairman, I can move to strike the last word then.
Gentleman is recognized.
And I don't, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I don't need 5 minutes. Basically, I just wanted to ask Mr. Chairman for unanimous consent to submit a couple of letters in support of both amendments for the record. And one of these, Mr. Chairman, comes from the U.S. Small Business Administration. I'll not read the letter, but it is a letter from Stephen Preston, the Administrator, U.S. Small Business Administration, in support of the amendment. And the other letter in support, Mr. Chairman, is from SBTC, the Small Business Technology Council, again addressed to both you, Mr. Chairman, and myself in support of both of the amendments that I've submitted. And I'll ask unanimous consent to submit these for the record in support of the amendment.
Without objection, so ordered. Is there any further discussion of the amendment? If not, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, with that, I ask for a recorded vote.
The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Wu.
No.
Chairman Wu votes no. Mrs. Richardson. Ms. Richardson votes no. Mr. Matheson. Mr. Matheson votes no. Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson votes no. Mr. Chandler. Mr. Chandler votes no. Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross votes no. Mr. Gordon. Mr. Gordon votes no. Mr. Gingrey.
Aye.
Mr. Gingrey votes aye. Mr. Ehlers.
Aye.
Mr. Ehlers votes aye. Mrs. Biggert. Mrs. Biggert votes no. Mr. Adrian Smith. Adrian Smith votes aye. Mr. Brown. Mr. Hall.
The clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, 3 members vote aye and 8 members vote no.
The amendment is not agreed to. If we proceed expeditiously, we may be able to get through the entire bill before and get to the floor in time for this series of votes. The fourth amendment on the roster is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, are you ready to proceed with your amendment? The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5789 offered by Mr. Wilson of Ohio.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize the gentleman from Ohio for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
As a strong supporter of small business innovation, research, and small business technical transfer programs, which serve as a lifeline for many small business and innovative businesses, my amendment today would designate nanotechnology-related research as a critical technology in the SBIR and STTR programs. This would allow companies to receive special consideration as they apply for federal grants for their work in nanotechnology. Today, nanotechnology has an impact on all sectors of our economy. And the work of nanotechnology can be found in electronics like our cell phones and BlackBerries, in our cosmetics, cars, and medical products. With nanotechnology playing such a fundamental role in our economy, it's critical that the U.S. investment in this industry continue to grow. In my district at Ohio University, such research is being done daily. I recently heard from some nanoscientists that if the research were included in this way, it would help their projects to go from the lab and to migrate to the market. The inclusion of nanotechnology research as a critical technology will help ensure that federal agencies continue to assist and even increase their support for nanotechnology companies in both SBIR and STTR programs. I encourage all my colleagues to support my amendment and reauthorize the Small Business Innovation Research Program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If not, the vote occurs on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
The ranking member.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm sorry, I was a little slow responding there. Mr. Chairman, I'm supportive of nanotechnology research and education initiatives, but I have some concerns about this particular amendment. As I read the amendment, the SBIR program includes nanotechnology topics in its list of other priorities alongside those from the Department of Defense and the National Critical Technologies Panel. For the STTR program, nanotechnology endeavors would be signaled out as a category of projects that could receive funding, thereby potentially narrowing the scope of the program. So I'm concerned that the language for these two programs, and especially the STTR, would carve out a specific benefit for nanotechnology at the expense of other worthy endeavors. It's very important to point out that under the current law, nanotechnology initiatives are not excluded from grant consideration. They compete for funding with other research and development projects, and there's nothing in the underlying bill that detracts from that reality. Nanotechnology research should be considered for grant funding, but it should not, I don't think, be given special consideration above other important topics. Just this morning, the full committee held a hearing in anticipation of reauthorizing National Nanotechnology Initiative. It's my understanding that the bill being drafted will incorporate SBIR and STTR programs, And certainly I look forward to working with my friend Mr. Wilson, the gentleman, to ensure that nanotechnology programs are advanced across many agencies. So while I support nanotechnology research and development initiatives, I have concern that the amendment might unduly advance those concerns over many other worthy fields of study. So I therefore would reluctantly urge a no vote on this amendment.
Is there further discussion of this amendment? If no, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Amendment number 5, the fifth amendment on the roster, is an amendment offered by the gentleman from Nebraska. Mr. Smith, are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Yes.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5789 offered by Mr. Adrian Smith of Nebraska.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. So ordered. I recognize the gentleman from Nebraska for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My amendment encourages the agencies to give, federal agencies to give priority to applications so as to increase the number of SBIR and STTR award recipients from rural areas. Firms located in a relatively small number of states have been successful in obtaining the awards through the program. According to an 06 government accountability study, about 70% of the awards and dollars awarded went to firms in only 10 states. Let me also say that the rural outreach program contained in these programs, it sunsetted, it expired, and certainly the rural areas, we need to address the brain drain. I don't want to expound on my in the interest of time, on my full remarks here, but certainly it is my intention to bring this to the attention of the committee and urge the committee to continue to work together on the brain drain and urge its adoption. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. I commend him for his amendment and support rural outreach. Is there any further discussion of the amendment? The ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to support the efforts of Mr. Smith. Businesses in rural areas typically have a harder time getting capital, even when they have a very good concept, because the limited numbers of lending institutions or venture capital firms. So this amendment does not require that agencies pick one business over another. It simply requires them to consider rural businesses and how they are represented in the overall agency's awards to increase the number of rural businesses receiving grants. I think it is a good amendment, Mr. Chairman. I urge my colleagues to support it.
I thank the gentleman. Are there any further comments on the amendment? If not, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Hearing none, the vote is on the bill, H.R. 5789, the Science and Technology Innovation Act of 2008, as amended. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I recognize Dr. Gingrey to offer a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the subcommittee favorably report H.R. 5789 as amended to the full committee. Furthermore, I move that staff be instructed to prepare the subcommittee legislative report and make necessary technical and conforming changes to the bill as amended in accordance with the recommendations of the subcommittee.
The question is on the motion to report the bill favorably. Those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed saying no. The ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I want to take this moment to thank staff on both sides for their very hard work on this bill. Bill Bain, who was a detailee to this committee, worked hard on this bill. The gentleman sitting next to me, Mike Queer, has worked tirelessly on this bill, and for my personal staff, Dennis Warden has worked very, very hard on this bill, and I thank them all very, very much. And Dr. Gingrey?
Mr. Chairman, if you allow me to say the same thing for staff on the minority side, I would like to thank them for their hard work. They really did a great job on this, and I think, Mr. Chairman, I commend you as well in running a very fair subcommittee markup and as best you can, and I hope that you and Chairman Gordon will remember to urge the Committee on Rules to make this a fair and open process and ask for an open rule. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank the gentleman for his cooperation, and I will commit to urging that the Rules Committee take this up as a full bill under some form of rule. And I want to thank the members for their attendance. This concludes our subcommittee markup. Thank you all very much.